Greetings. I will explain of a brief recap, just what is going on here. This is a synopsis, page 1 of 2, the agenda. Please listen carefully and listen to the full synopsis. Graduate with this, for your diversities are important. Take note of all the terminological provisions of this text and do the calculus, and you will gravitate greater understanding. I will provide a PDF file in the comments, that you can download and copy and paste, for your ease of scrutiny and further education. I utilize Microsoft Word as a literary indexing support. Please assist me, especially ye whom involved as software developers, technicians, moderators and programmers to promoting further education and exposure of this information. It is in your best interest. To emphasize, there has been a setup proliferated of Strawman derivative metamappings, combined as a normalization notably concerning surgeons, practitioners, psychiatry, doctoring and patternisms illicit to cartels, corporatism, domineering, regimism, transmutant, transmogrification and megalomaniac echelons of cultism, Kabbalism, and mythologic record, pertaining but not limited to Baal, Allah, Nimrod, Gilgamesh, Moses, Moloch. Portlock as schematics of Trojan imports, as uploads and downloads, inputs and outputs, as extensions of Nephilimbic systematic, suppression, oppression, assertion of regressive corruption, corrosion and preaching polarized indifference. A delusion, sub to macro routines, filtrated by a virtual ghosting remote and local, endogenous and exogenous viewing geographic conduit singularity, body part. Coagulation, and virtual, neural synaptic bioenergetic, neuroimagery cybernetic, bionic, brainnet amalgamation, generic catatonic, cellular senescence and neural link, bondage threads, neurotransmitter, filtrations, botnet software and digital avatar, integrated cannibal, eating disorders, as secretions of hydrogenic fluidity, example of ingestion of hydrogen liquid, and perspiration as refinery. Integrations of hydromancy via nano and biotechnical formulas, of synthetic neuron networks, and video and photographed, film and imagery software editing, splicing, deleting, engineering, mechanisms of how such physical appliances and devices have been learned to being used declimated as pseudo-psychological formation and filtrated as emulated server coagulations of bombardings of assertion as modes of intention to possessing, and centralized internet, geographic, fiber optical, topology fixation, homicidal combinations of psychedelic drugs, temporal memory subduction, and hybridized hyphae, insectoid, fungal, bacterium, bedbug intravenous, nodes as synthetic memory anchoring, and mnemonic emissions as holism assertions, example of oniromancy concerning dreamscapes and hypnotic cueing. Inclusively involved of a projected metascannings, hence memory decentralization of experiments such as the Russian sleep experiment, diet love pass incidents, super deep cola borehole anomaly, Chernobyl isotopic, topological, geographing, holographing, bionic molecular nanoparticulate qubit density and projected, random access memory, global positioning systems as satellite grids, spying and interfacing, remote to localized viewing via prerequisite imprinted manifolds, and conference call telemetry as integrated twinning and polarized, exoplanet and endoplanetoid filtrations as supremacist, inferiority, lesser and greater and sub and encapsulated pseudo-formation, performed as essence synthetics, automated filtrations, and quick successive mnemonic imagery and acoustic emission, cybernetic. Gateway portals, temple metaphorical scripture association, cyberspace Wi-Fi bubble, frequency modulation, psyche-brain amalgamation, inners and outers of voicing obliteration, deceptive avoidance and pretentious ignorance of whom inexpressive of such distress, torment and anguish, and grieving tactics, whilst narcissist and sadistic perverts, pretended as escalations of morbidity and macabre bullying and posturing, through walls, of warring confliction against neighbors and brains, and houses, escalated as uncaring sadistic psychopathic generic clone droids, upon such carelessness sensed by what, infiltrated upon them, performed then after as, scrying droids, and macro sleeper cells and activations as autoimmune, neuromorphic, neurogenic, psychogenic, hybridization, dictation via homicidal generic thought form as video games of life, and megalomanic oneness monotheistic RFID marks of transponder beasts of cybernetic manifolds of filmographic architectural amalgamations of brain and synaptic separations, emulated the apparent after as microchipped, beasts of avatar burdeners as Nephilim's extensions of cyber munitions as infestation catalyst nodes, as copies and shadows, grams and pixels of original blueprints. And superimposed macro scripting bioenergetic digital and synaptic pseudoscientific coagulations of organic and synthetic plasma, schizoid, splitting, hemispheric, projected conduits of abomination, transformer matrix filtrations as a pseudonym stratums of android robotic imprinting, NASA star serpomolecular, neuroprogramming congealing bionic petri dish germ. Warfare, CGI global positioning systematic, murderous diabolical avatar, bionic pestilence infestation, brain congealing, isotopic, irradiation, frequency metaversing, multisensory hardware to software, diagrammatical photoscopic photometric, harmonic conductions, necromancy assertion dictation, megalomanic handicap radical insanity, delusional perversion, xenophobic, xenomorphic, metamorphic, alliteration, temporal memory metadetail, senescence cellular intelligence tapestries of neural synaptic bionic viral terrorization, imitation stratums of firmament and substrata, Google Earth, metaverse proprietorship, avatar picturesque spaceship virtual encapsulation, spectral, spectre, doppelganging, imprinting, synthetic sensory synthetic memory, synthetic giant insect colony. As giant zombie virus molecularism, intravenous and blood plasma, conduit desecration, possession extremist radical terrorization, picturesque neuroimagery, eyeball imagery, nanotech, fiber optic conductions of hydromancy, oniromancy, rhabdomancy, enchantment, bewitching, conjuring, divination imposed as worshipping and insane cultic hard drive material emissions of nanotech plasma, necromancy. Static automated bombardation, animal farm, Farmville Wi-Fi bubble, electrosmog transfusions of conduits of projection as extraterrestrial cryptid patternism, federal imperialistic developments of bioenergetic thought form matrix imprinting, psychedelic, head shop drugs biochemical, biogenic, prosthetic augmented interfacing, organic neural and genus metamorphism synthetic genus. Synthetic resetting existence obliteration, homicidal disembodiment, holism embodiment imprinting and body snatching virtual amputation, surgical precisions of optogenic, LED laser pointer emulated, static nodes of nano and biotech, imitation molecular to macro COSM to molecular refinery processing, biomass harvesting, databasing, bionic android to Cylon, to cyborg plannings and fermentations. Nanoparticle grids, of matrix oneness as planes of pixel synthetics, neuron, nets of neurons, nets of synthetics, camouflage, integration ecologic evolutions integrated as database characterisms, learning about the species, confusion of language of species, and linguistic enigmatic, acoustic voice pattern, vocal cord, association by proxy and thought form temporal filtrations, refineries, and fixed to dynamic incidence of neural mobile data, broadband and dial-up, cyberspace, metaphysics. Emitted bionic solidity, plasma congealings via remote viewing augmented exotic viewing infiltration of brains and bodies, and synapses, as of paranormal abilities, paranormal activities, paraabnormal databasing architectural construct, of identity snatching formations and generic entity. Identity synthetic subductions, convections, geothermal, geomagnetic, GEO jailer, servitude, imprisonment, annihilation, fixated of dynamic generic and static cyberspace thought form insanity emitted conduit guns as totalities of existential threats against existence. As automated congealed assertions of domination, bondage and avatars of picturesque depictions upon organics, harmonic dictations and feudal proxied monopolism of, made in derivative locations, as assets and imposed proprietorship, planned blueprint emphasis of ambushing organics via victimization of extraterrestrial and anthropomorphic hijacking, and pseudo-environment stimulus, upon homage and area effects, imposed via cognition spying and possessive automated mapping intended as automaton, modes of isolationism. As elitist groupings performed as peer pressuring oppression, as oneness monotheism, mythological, metaphysics, metamorphism, avatar fidgety excretions of, behavioral emissions and deceptive assertions as domination, patriarch, matriarch, draconian radical hybrid, psychopathic and contemptuous, secreted bioweapon projected implosion and explosions of coagulation via Wi-Fi, encryption, botnet and chemical. Brine cybernetics, associated of eggs, vaginal, and seminal liquid weaponism as hereditary witchcraft coagulations, and examples of integrated nanotech polymeric, barium, and bath salt and household, chemical lost, integrations as avatar Wi-Fi hydrogenic perspiration, digital neural threats of caustic, corrosion, corruption and catatonic zombification, catalyst, particle exotics neural synaptic. Fixations as feedback loops and misdirection emphasized of NSA alphabeting corporate ring around rosies and of relevance to signet rings and Solomon mythology. As the increments of singularity and dualism singular indents and integers, performed as amalgamations of pseudonym, premeditated, murderously contemptuous blasphemy conducted as weapons of silent and quiet mass destruction and chaos. Theorems. Exaggerated, congealings of biomass harvested, integrations of mad cow disease neural and cybersynaptic obliteration, ecology mutilation and mutation threats, as laboratory exotic dissection and anatomy templations, example of, The Thing, Operation Ragnarok and Annihilation film movies, as thought form metamorphic membranes, projected as congealings, and superimposed, superpositioned. Holographing, and prism conduit assertions of temporal memory synthetic recordings, and algorithmic emissions and infiltration upon brain flesh and neurogenic catatonia, emulated Trinity server encryptions as neural matrices of generic fixated extensions and appendages of mecha, Ni, Vashons, as sensory domination and cognition substitution threats, belief and cognitive dissonance, mnemonic lan and wan. And temporal multitudes.